The definition of a biotic component is something that is living, such as plants and animals. So we know that soil is not living. We know that sunshine isn't living. We know that a tree is living, and we know that water is not living. So C is the correct answer. So remember, a biotic component is something that is living, and an abiotic component is something that is non-living. Question 2. We know that a producer always is the beginning of a food chain, and the producer is also known as an organism. So we know that a producer does not break down dead material. We know that it can use sunlight to make energy and food, and that is why it's a producer. We know that it doesn't eat anything else, it only absorbs sunlight. And we know that it doesn't live in the sky, so B is the correct answer. Question 3. So this question asks for a decomposer. So we know that a decomposer is an organism that gets their energy by breaking down dead material. So a bird does not break down dead material. Bacteria does. A ladybird doesn't, and a fox doesn't. So again, B is the correct answer. We know that a tropical rainforest can be found on or near the equator. So it's around the tropics, like the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. It's not technically 15 degrees. That's too far north and south of the equator. We know that it's too far north if it's in Canada, and we know that it can't be in the mid-latitudes because that would be too far north and too far south. A is the correct answer. Question 5. So we're after the statement which best describes the tropical rainforest. So we know that the tropical rainforest, the trees are very green. We know the temperature is high. We know it's all year round. So it could be this one. The tree drops leaves in winter. Well, we know that the tropical rainforest only has one season. So we know that's not right. So we can get rid of that one. We know that the vegetation is sparse. So sparse just means there's not a lot of it. Well, we know there's loads of trees in the tropical rainforest. So it can't be that one. And the growing season is short. Well, we know that trees grow all year round in the tropical rainforest, so it can't be that one either. So your answer is A. So if we look at this answer, so a pond ecosystem, so they have named an ecosystem, so that gets them 1 mark. It has more oxygen, so they're mentioning some type of feature. So the oxygen is a feature, and they've mentioned it's at the surface, so that would be another mark. Then at the bottom, so that kind of goes with that, so that's that 2nd mark. And they've named a consumer such as ducks. That would be another mark. Remember, 3 marks, 3 points. If they did not mention a pond ecosystem and they just said an ecosystem, they would only get 2 marks. So you must be specific with your ecosystem. Okay, question 7. What might happen? So they've mentioned that they would decrease. So decrease is them actually stating the effect. And because they've stated the effect, they get the mark, because they're saying what might happen. Now to get the 2nd mark, they need to explain their effect. So they have here, because if there are less ladybirds, then the blackbirds will eat more caterpillars and mud beetles. And that is their elaboration. And that gives them 2 marks. For question 7, the same thing, it's asking you to explain. So we know that it decreases in number. So this is quite a simple statement. So that would be worth a level 1. Would lead to fewer predators eating caterpillars and ladybirds, so the population would increase. This part is detailed. That would be level 2. This could lead to a reduction, level 1, simple, in the number of aphids, as there will be more ladybirds, as there will be, is detailed. Level 2. So level 2 answer requires more detailed explanation, so this would be 4 marks. So make a point, give detail, make a point, give detail. For question 8, a lot of you solely relied on the figure and did not include some of your own knowledge about vegetation adaptations. Not only in these types of questions do you need to use the figure, but you must include your own knowledge to demonstrate to the examiner that you know what you are talking about and can refer it back to the question that you are asked. So with question 8, you needed to describe and explain the features of the vegetation shown in the photograph. So what you needed to do for this question was to give enough detail. So if we look at this answer, we've got that the shrub layer receives limited sunlight. So instantly they have used a figure as it asks for in the question. They've then added their own knowledge of 0 to 5 meters. So own knowledge, and they've said that it's the lowest layer, and that's just a level 1 type of answer, a basic answer. In order to get more detail, they've then gone on to say this is where shallow buttress roots can be found, so they've linked in vegetation and linked it back to the figure, so that would be level 2. And then they've said that it is to support the tall tree trunks. So they've actually expanded that even more. So that would be a level 3, a detailed answer. They move on to say that the canopy and under canopy is where epiphytes, so own knowledge again, lianas, drip tips, all own knowledge. And the under canopy and canopy is obviously using the figure. They move on to say that epiphytes grow on other plants. Lianas climb up from the shrub layer towards the canopy, linking back to the figure. So that's them elaborating, so level 3. Moving towards the sunlight. Whereas drip tips in the canopy trees allow water to flow rapidly off the leaf surface. So that's just telling us really what they do. So that would be level 2 type answer. Whilst the emergence layer, use of figure, own knowledge, is where the tallest trees are found. And then they move on to say as they are competing for sunlight and therefore travel beyond the canopy. That is a detailed part of their answer, level 3. Now, all in all, this type of question, as it's a level mark question, is based on elaboration and including that detail. And I can see very clearly here that they've expanded the point here, level 3, they've expanded the point here, level 3, and they've expanded the point here, level 3. So overall, out of 6 marks, that would be level 3, 4 marks, because they've expanded each point. For question 9, quite a few of you did not use the climate graph correctly. Some of you confused the bars as temperature and the line as precipitation. Okay, you need to be careful with this for climate graphs. The bars are always for precipitation, for rainfall, and the line and the points are always for temperature. Some of you were not looking at the scale on the actual climate graph, and if I show you the climate graph, some of you were not using the axis labels to the left and the right. you must be really clear and use correct figures when you are using climate graphs, and give detail and prove to the examiner that you have looked at it and can understand things like this. To describe, so only to give features you see. We know in this question that the temperature range is small. That's very detailed. It shows they've looked at the graph. That would be level 2. They've given a number, but now we need to check if that number is correct. So they've actually used the graph by saying in June to October the temperature is 29. Yes, it is. And they will always check your answer and your figure is correct. But in December to January it's 25. Again, that is correct. So they have used figures. They have used detail. So this would be a level 2 answer. Just to convince the examiner to make sure they get 4 marks, they've then gone on to mention precipitation, because climate is temperature and precipitation. So they've put here precipitation in January is 345 millimetres. Again, that is correct. Rapidly decreases. That shows they've looked at the graph and looked at a trend. To 20 millimetres. So again, correct measurement. Then gradually increases, trend, to 325 millimetres. This answer is detailed, uses figures, states a trend. Four marks. Level 2 answer. For this question, it was asking you to describe, say what you see. 3 marks, 3 points. So they put highest amount of deforestation in southern parts of the Amazon. 1 statement, 1 mark. Sparsely distributed, so it's spread out. 2nd mark. With some deforestation north of Bolivia. Well, that's true. 1 mark. 3 marks, 3 points. For question 11, they asked you to look at the statement which best describes the tropical rainforest. So we know that the rainforest has quite a bit of nutrients, not that much, but quite a bit, so you can disregard that one. We know the soil's infertile, or the majority of it, and we know it's got a rapid nutrient recycling, so it could be this one. It's thin, it's not fertile, and not sure about alkaline, so cross that one off. Deep with slow recycling, well, we know it recycles a lot, so it can't be that one. So the answer is B. So the tropical rainforest has a thin top layer which holds nutrients, and that is due to climate. Question 12 was by far the most difficult question, and this will come with practice. But anytime you see a 9-mark question, you must always include an example of somewhere you have learnt about. So in this case, some of you might have learnt about the Amazon rainforest. What also tripped people up was this assess part. Some of you did not make a judgment in your answer. You just told us the social, economic and environmental impacts and didn't tell us which one was the worst and why. This will limit you to no more than 3 marks if you do not make a judgment. If you did make a judgment, it just means you need to add more detail and back up your point with your own knowledge. The other thing that caught some people out is some of you might have mentioned the social and economic but completely forgot the environmental impacts. Or you might have written all environmental impacts. If the question is asking you for 3 different types of impacts, you must mention all 3 to give a balanced answer. If you don't, again, you are limited to 1 to 3 marks. For question 12, we need to assess social, economic and environmental impacts. So this question is looking for all 3. And they're looking for an area that you've studied. So this is by far one of the most trickiest questions. So let's have a look at this answer. So they say the Amazon rainforest. So they instantly say an area they have studied. So that would be AO1, as they are giving us clear knowledge. They store 100 billion tonnes of carbon. So that's them showing their understanding. So that would be AO2. However, deforestation will release some of this CO2, contributing to global warming. Again, that is them showing their understanding of the impacts of deforestation. So this would be AO2. They actually then move on to give a judgment by saying this is by far a global impact which could contribute to sea level rise and melting of the polar ice caps. So this would actually be AO2 for understanding, and actually them applying it to some type of judgment, and that would be AO3. So they've already mentioned above the environmental effects. Then they move on to the economic effects by saying the rainforest has exploited for its resources. This allows economic development, which can bring wealth. So we've got AO2 all the way throughout here, which can bring wealth to Brazil. That's them showing their understanding and applying their knowledge, which is AO2. Providing jobs for the community, improving people's standard of living and quality of life. Again, applying their knowledge. And they actually make no judgment in this section, but that's okay because they've made a judgment above. They move on to then looking at the social impacts. So some local communities have been damaged due to deforestation, as the destruction of the rainforest has increased surface runoff, showing their understanding. Washing away nutrients within the soil affects locals as their food supply, loss of animals due to their habitat being destroyed, has been damaged. Again, AO2, they're constantly giving us their own knowledge. They're constantly linking back to the question. They expand it even more by saying this results in local tribes migrating to other areas due to food sources. So actually giving that extra bit of detail and elaborating on that first point. You constantly need to expand your answer to get full marks with a 9-mark question. Now, because this question is because this question is an assessed question, you must make a judgment at the end. So they then move on to say, I believe the environmental impacts of global warming far outweigh the social and economic. So not only have they made a judgment here, but they've compared it to 2 other factors. Then they back it up by saying due to the overall impacts of deforestation being created on a global scale. They're linking back all the time back to their knowledge, AO2. And not just locally in Brazil, so AO1, location knowledge. And then they stretch that a little bit further by even justifying it more by saying, on the other hand, economic impacts are somewhat more positive due to boosting the country's economy. And hence them saying, well, environmental impacts are by far the worst because they're more negative. And this would be AO2/AO3 as well. So you must always make a judgment. So this question would actually be a level 3 full mark question because they give enough detail, they elaborate their point, they give AO3, AO2 and AO1. They name their study area, the Amazon rainforest. They're constantly giving specific knowledge. They are constantly referring to social, environmental, economic. They're elaborating their points further down. You must make sure you do that in this question. Now if we go back up to question 12, because not only do you get 9 marks for question 12, you also get 3 marks for SPAG right here. Now, not only does it need to be well written, good punctuation, good grammar, it will also rely on key geographical words. So if we go through this question and highlight all the geographical words, rainforest, carbon, deforestation. This entire question is littered with geographical words. And because there are such a wide range of words used, and because there is such a large number of words used and they are consistently used, this is what would get you 3 out of 3 marks for SPAG.